He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Masters of the Universe.
There have been a lot of controversies with the series, Masters of the Universe Revelations, and somewhat rightfully so. Growing up, I remember flipping through the channels and spotting this from time to time, but it didn't appeal to me, so I never watched it. So yes, this is me admitting that I am not a fan, but I do know what it's like to be passionate about a series, a movie, a book, and don't really want people to f with it. I feel compelled to make this video not just because of the pile of negative reviews, but because I feel that fans deserve better. If not for fans, there would be no money to be made off of pretty much anything. They are the reason companies like Netflix, Amazon, and Disney are more comfortable investing in reboots than original ideas, because of the fan base. I would think that those assigned to work on these reboots would not just have a little bit of respect for the original content, but would want to do right by it and by the fans as well, because the fans are the reason that they have that job. Under no circumstance am I saying give in to every demand by the fans, but to keep them in mind, because their love and dedication is the reason why a 30-year-old show is relevant enough to greenlight a reboot. And if it's done right, everyone walks away a winner. Let's just get started already. To my understanding, this series is a continuation of the original, which isn't an issue to start with. Episode 1 started out strong, a little too strong. It reintroduces the characters to the new audience, but quickly picks up the pace, and a cool fight breaks out, which induces nostalgia, and by the end of the episode, the main character dies. Plenty of people have complained about this, but let me just give my 2 cents anyway. The death of the main character is something that is reserved for the end of the story, because under no circumstance will the audience believe that they're permanently dead. They'll be expecting them to come back at some point to save the day, which can distract the audience from the story. Also, any other death is greatly devalued because the hero has already made the ultimate sacrifice, and when the resurrection does happen, by whatever means, it further degrades the heroic death. So, here is my rewrite. As Teela is being knighted, Prince Adam hears the sorceress call for aid. Eternian forces make their way to Castle Grayskull. As the fight spirals out of control, He-Man appears. He and Teela struggle to gain control as they do their best not to disturb the sensitive heart within Grayskull. Unfortunately, that's exactly what Skeletor wants. Mossman assists them but is overwhelmed by the flames and is forced to retreat. He-Man becomes enraged by this and accidentally opens the Hall of Wisdom when stabbing Skeletor. Skeletor instructs Evil Lyn to retrieve the orb as he sets the garden on fire. He-Man stops her, but her staff's magic triggers the orb. The sorceress stops time to instruct He-Man to use the sword to contain the blast. With the last of his strength, Skeletor stabs He-Man. The sword splits in two, and He-Man's true form is revealed. With his injury, Adam can't hold on any longer, but the sorceress takes his place and turns to look at Teela one last time. I need to address this. In the first episode, when Skeletor reveals himself, he's shot in a very humorous way, which is a red flag as to how he's going to be depicted for the rest of the series, as a joke, which is distasteful. I've noticed that a lot of side characters die in the series, and it feels like their deaths is nothing more than fillers. If they weren't from the original series, I probably wouldn't care, but since they are, let's save them for another day. I chose for the sorceress to take Adam's place because it made better sense for her to be the first casualty and make that ultimate sacrifice to kickstart the series, showing that the stakes are going to get high and that no one is safe. Because like I said previously, if the main character dies, that's as high as the stakes go and nothing else is going to cut it unless the world is destroyed or something. I've been doing my best to learn about the lore of Eternia for this rewrite, and I'm using this series as a bit of a guide, so if I get some things wrong, I do apologize. Now on to the rest. Upon the death of the sorceress, Teela feels a pain in her chest but ignores it to assist Adam. With reinforcements making their way down, Evil Lyn teleports herself and the injured Skeletor away. Before any questions can be asked, an earthquake occurs. They quickly make their way out and back to the palace. King Randor demands an explanation for his injured son. Duncan explains that Prince Adam wished to assist and was injured as a result. The king looks to Teela for confirmation and she hesitantly confirms it to be true. With Prince Adam's injuries being tended to, Teela furiously demands answers from Duncan. What the hell is going on? Adam's He-Man? I know this is a shock to you, but right now we have more pressing matters to attend to. Like what? The death of the sorceress for starters, and the disappearance of the Sword of Power and what it all means for Eternia. What are you talking about? What he means is, how long can Eternia last without the sword or the sorceress? Magic is the source of Eternia's existence, and without the Sword of Power as a conduit, nothing is left to bind the magic to Eternia. There's also one more thing. Prince Adam's wound. While Adam sleeps, he has visions of the sorceress and the sword. He wakes and asks Cringer to get the others. A mob of citizens have gathered demanding an explanation. The wells have dried up, the rivers are falling suit, the healthy crops and plentiful fruits are withering and rotting away, and another earthquake happens. The king and queen does their best to calm the masses. Meanwhile, Adam tells his friends the vision he had. He saw the location of the two swords, and because he's a champion, they won't be able to get them without him. Duncan leaves to inform the king and queen. Orko and Cringer leave to let Adam and Tila speak privately. Why didn't you ever tell me? I almost did a couple times. No one realizes just how much power burdens you until you have it. And with every person that knows, only burdens them too. I didn't want that for you, especially since you have your own burdens. Tila clutches her chest as she feels the pain again. Duncan enters the room, insisting that they need to leave immediately. The land is dying, and if they don't want the people to suffer any more than they have to, they need to get the swords. Against their wishes, Adam leaves with them. Normally I don't mind time skips, but with this one, it didn't feel necessary. Mainly because it took away the urgency to reforge the Sword of Power and restore balance to Eternia. Also, the biggest criticism I came across when watching reviews is how Tila's character responds to finding out about He-Man's true identity and how she uses it as an emotional crutch. I decided to go ahead and address it to get it out of the way so the characters can move forward from that. I'm aware that giving Adam an injury will sideline him, especially since he doesn't have the Sword of Power, but this was to give Tila room for her character development without overempowering Adam's character development. Let's continue. They do their best to make the journey as smooth as possible for Adam, but Duncan can see that he's struggling and they stop at the next town. They have trouble finding accommodations within reasonable means. The further they travel, the worse the conditions get. Adam feels responsible and tries to help, but a group that worships the motherboard emerges. Cringer gets the others as Orko fends them off, but even his simplest spells isn't working. The group gets hit with a spell and flees, but Orko is confused as that was not his magic. The others catch up and Evil Lyn reveals herself. You have a lot of nerve showing your face after what you've done. You think I like this any more than you do? Why are you here? It's Skeletor. He's dying. How is that any of our concern? Evil Lyn looks to Adam and he confirms that whatever is happening to Skeletor is happening to him as well. Orko speculates that the orb's power poisoned the both of them when they came in contact with it. Lyn suspects that since Skeletor came in contact with it through Adam, it connected their fates, so if one of them dies, the other dies too. Tila is unconvinced and isn't keen on allowing Lyn to tag along. Adam remembers his vision and knows that she has something they need. With it begrudgingly settled, the group procures a ship from Andra, a young mechanic. Out at sea, they are attacked by Lyn's former associates, Merman, but they manage to gain the upper hand and force him to take them to the entrance of Subternia. Lyn pulls out the skull and opens the gates. To be honest, I don't mind Andra's character. It was Tila's character that was a bit obnoxious. I had issues with the way Skeletor came back from the dead, so I rewrote that and took it a step further by connecting the main antagonist and protagonist fates together. I thought it'd be a nice nod to the original because there was always the two of them against each other. As for Evil Lyn, I don't know how other people feel about this, but I like that while traveling with Tila and the others, Lyn's character was explored and shown that there's more to her than just being the evil sidekick. But under no circumstance do I agree with her having affection for Skeletor. Even a newbie like me could see that made no sense. Upon entering Subternia, they look to Adam to lead them. The deeper they go, the stronger the sword beckons to him. When he turns around, his friends are gone. He can feel the presence of the sword getting stronger, but Subternia's ruler won't give it up without a trade. Adam offers up his fear for the sword and his friends. Submerged in darkness, he sees the sword of power, but in the hands of another. His greatest fear is revealed, that he is nothing without He-Man. Elsewhere, Tila struggles with the pain in her chest as she too is forced to face her fear. Unable to concentrate, the weight of her fears becomes too much for her and she gives into it. Adam can't dodge He-Man's attack for much longer, but he hears Tila, just like he did with the sorceress. He yells out not to give in to the fear, but becomes distracted and can't dodge He-Man's attack. Tila hears Adam's voice and is encouraged to fight her way through her fear. Adam is shocked that the attack missed, but realizes why. He may feel that he's nothing without He-Man, but He-Man doesn't exist at all without him. The image of He-Man dissolves into the sword, and Adam takes it, releasing the others from their illusions, but they're not out of danger yet. The ruler of Subternia is unsatisfied with the turn of events and attacks them, but Orko fends him off and gives the others the necessary time to escape. Evil Lyn tries to assist, but freezes as she hears a voice telling her not to. The group escapes, but at a cost. Like I said, I'm new to the world of He-Man and I don't know how much is out of character from the original, but I like Orko's backstory and him bonding with Lynn. It was a sweet moment and it was sad when he died. I thought it was well executed, but then Teela had to open her mouth and I didn't care for what Andra said either. It was a bit out of character for her because she doesn't have the history with Lynn that Teela had. Also, this seems to be an occurrence with Teela's character. She only ever seems to see her pain and blames others for it. When Adam dies, she blames pretty much everyone around her, and when Orko dies, she blames Lynn, insisting that it should have been her even though Teela was the one that made the deal and went back on it. This is a terrible trait to give to a main character if it's never acknowledged or fixed. After Orko's funeral, they make their way to the Hall of Paternia, but they are startled by a group of riders. They call out to them to join the hunt. They do so in hopes that they can help. When the hunt is over, they are shocked to find that they are the previous champions, but the champions are just as shocked to find that Adam is the current champion. Grayskull tells Adam that there's a room that only champions are allowed to enter, and that is where the sword will be. Adam enters the room, and to his surprise is He-Man. In the center is a mirror that shows him as his true self. His reflection pulls out the sword, and Adam tries to grab it from the mirror, but can't. Finally, he realizes what he needs to do. He changes back with hesitation, but with a sigh of relief pulls out the sword. With both swords retrieved, Roboto, Duncan, and Andra get to work in reforging the sword. Roboto gets injured and shuts down. Duncan believes that he can fix him, but they'll need to return to Eternia in order for him to do so. They return to Castle Grayskull, and Adam begins to call down the power, but then Skeletor emerges out of Evil Lynn's staff and takes the sword and its power for his own. This was one of the few things that people seemed to like about the reboot was meeting previous champions. When doing the rewrite about obtaining the second sword, I wanted it to be meaningful since it was so anticlimactic in the reboot, and given Adam's injury, it also had to be non-physical. So I kind of ripped off Harry Potter, which is weird because I was thinking of the Neverending Story when writing this. Go figure. As for Roboto, I didn't feel it was necessary to kill him off, especially since Orko's epic death literally just happened in the last episode. It only takes away from Orko's death and cheapens Roboto's death. One more thing, I personally would have preferred Evil Lynn always planned to double-cross him but started to have second thoughts when bonding with Orko, but in the end goes through with it, and that's why I rewrote it like that. Because in the reboot, she came up as a lost puppy without Skeletor, and if they were going for an emotional betrayal, they shouldn't have killed Orko because he was the only one that bonded with Lynn. With Skeletor now in possession of the sword, he rewards Evil Lynn for her loyalty and a fight ensues between the two groups. However, Skeletor can't seem to control his newly established powers. That's when Adam realizes that the power is rejecting him. This has him wondering if by some chance the power of Grayskull is still with him. With no other viable option, he takes a chance and calls down the power. To everyone's shock, he transformed, but not the way they thought. With no hesitation, the enraged savage He-Man attacks, and the others do their best to stay out of the way. Unfortunately, the transformation seems to be agitating the poison wound. They all do their best to restrain Adam, but it's not enough. Duncan urges Teela to call out to him internally like she did in Subternia. While Teela tries to break through to him with the last of Skeletor's control, he harnesses the power for a large blast, but Adam regains control and shields his friends. They're blasted a good distance away, and Adam powers down as he loses consciousness. To their surprise, they're not followed and take the opportunity to get away. Skeletor too is forced to power down and is furious with the outcome of events. When watching the second half of the series and seeing Skeletor take champion form and stay in it somewhat annoyed me. I know that in the original, He-Man could hold his champion form for however long he liked, but for this reboot that's supposed to be more mature and grounded, so to speak, I would have liked for there to be rules and stakes to go with this exceptional power. The sorceress's power comes with rules and limitations, and her power is considered equal if not superior to He-Man's. So it only makes sense that there's a catch with the sword. Not to mention that it's been confirmed that the sword is a mantle that's passed down, and I like to think that in its own way, it can choose who it bestows its power to, but I will cover that in episode 8. The group is picked up by merchants and taken to the palace. Adam is rushed to have his wounds treated while the rest explain all that transpired. King Randall orders the city to be evacuated while the army is assembled. Elsewhere, Skeletor's outraged that he can't control the power and that his wound has not healed. Evil Lynn speculates that Adam has to be the one to call down the power since he was the champion that the sorceress chose. Skeletor makes it clear that he'd rather die before ever allowing Adam to summon back He-Man. He instructs Evil Lynn to search for a solution for his dilemma. Adam wakes with Tila by his side and begins to confess another secret that he's kept from her, but Tila already knows. When the sorceress died, she felt it and just knew, but that's not important to her right now. What's important is finding a way to get the sword back to Adam, and Tila thinks she knows a way. It takes Adam a moment to realize what she means and refuses for her to make that sacrifice, but with him bedridden, there's not much he can do. Tila locks his door for extra measure because she knows he won't stay put without a fight. She leaves with Duncan and Andra to execute her plan. This is the calm before the storm. This was a little trickier to rewrite because I didn't want Tila to be able to use any powers besides telepathy, because it made no sense for her to have these abilities before becoming the sorceress, even with the assistance of her mother. That is why I felt strongly on needing to kill off the sorceress in the first episode. Her death was used to awaken the slumbering power within Tila and acknowledge that she has a connection with the sorceress. This is also used to pave the way for her to make the conscious choice to become the next sorceress. In the reboot, it came off more as a demand for her to be the next sorceress instead of her choosing it for herself. Not to mention, she was very anti-magic throughout the entire series, so yeah. They sneak into Grey Skull through the sewers but are ambushed. Duncan and Andra hold them off as Tila heads to the chamber. Once there, the sorceress appears but only in spirit. Tila becomes overwhelmed with questions she wishes to ask her but knows that they don't have time. The sorceress explains the process that she will have to undergo to become the next sorceress. When hearing this, Tila is unsure if she's strong enough to make that decision. Evelyn too contemplates on what her next move should be as well. To her understanding, the sword should have reset when it split and was reforged, but because there is no successor to the previous sorceress, the sword will reject all except for the champion chosen by the previous sorceress. The simplest solution would be to become the next sorceress, but that would mean she would be tethered to the castle. She has no desire for such a fate, but if Skeletor finds out, he'll force it upon her. The next best solution would be to kill Adam, but it's uncertain if that would fix the issue or permanently hold it in place. Skeletor enters the room for answers, but instead is informed of invaders in the castle and an army approaching. She encourages him to transform and show them all how futile resistance truly is. He's hesitant given what happened last time, but Lynn insists that all of Eternia needs to know who their champion is now. This convinces Skeletor to transform, but during the process, Lynn took some of the power and stored it in her staff. However, Skeletor does something that she wasn't expecting. He raises his own army, an army of the dead. When watching this show for the first time, Evil Lynn's character is what I gravitated to the most. I liked her design for the most part, and her voice actress nailed it. And I really liked her character development for the first half, but then it went off the rails in the second half, especially with this particular scene. I'm just going to say this. Her character is better than this. She's smarter than that, and I wanted to show off her intelligence with this rewrite. Her backstory was okay, but it could have been done better. I didn't feel it was necessary to add one in, so I just left it out. Now on to Skeletor. He was done dirty. He may have been a bit of a comical character in the original, but he was still the main antagonist. What's sad is that in the first episode, he was very threatening, and I was looking forward to seeing how he was going to up himself when he obtained the Sword of Power, but he really didn't do anything with it. He just clung to the power until it was taken from him, which was extremely poorly written. I just wanted to do him justice as the final boss villain that he should have been. Tila strips down to her bare essentials and steps into the water. The war has begun for the fate of Eternia, but it's not going well. King Randor's forces are being overwhelmed, but help is on its way. Orko is back and assists all he can, but it's still not enough. With every fallen soldier on their side only adds to Skeletor's army. At this rate, retreating is the only viable option, but a voice can be heard, assuring them that they are not alone. They look to the hills, and allies from all corners of Eternia has come to their aid. With the numbers even, they charge with confidence. Orko hears Tila's voice and teleports from the battlefield to Adam, who is still locked in his room. Although delighted to see Orko again, Adam knows that this can only mean that Tila went through with it. They teleport within Grey Skull and Orko goes for the sword, but Lynn stops him. Orko can see in her eyes that she doesn't want to fight him, but he needs to get the sword. Adam is run out of time and so goes for Skeletor, but he will die before he lets the sword leave his hands, and Lynn is more than happy to oblige. Orko is quickly becoming overwhelmed, but help has finally come. Tila appears as the new sorceress. Skeletor and Lynn are taken back by this, but they know her weaknesses. Skeletor screeches at Lynn to grab Adam, but Tila won't let her get near him. She also has a score to settle with Lynn for lying and betraying them, but Lynn won't allow herself to be defeated so easily. She unleashes the Grayskull power that she stole and transforms. Here's something else that's been kind of bothering me. Evelyn was still in champion form when Adam regained the sword and called out its power, thus transforming him, and then he shares that power with Skeletor. Like I said earlier, I don't know the lore of He-Man because I'm just now being introduced to it. The reason I have such an issue with this is, to my understanding, Adam was exclusively chosen by the sorceress to wield the Sword of Power. If anyone can call out its power and hold on to it after losing ownership of the sword, it takes away from the specialty of the sword and the majesty of its power. Not to mention, they never really gave an explanation as to why or how Evelyn transcended beyond the use of the sword. I guess they thought it would be a cool concept, which it kind of was. I'll give them that. It just would have helped to appreciate it more if it was understood better. Anyway, I like the fight between Teela and Lin and wanted to keep it in, but I needed to make it an even fight, and I like to think that Lin's transformation wasn't too heavily forced in my rewrite. Let's not also forget that fights are always better when it's personal with scores that need to be settled. Skeletor is distracted by what just transpired and Orko manages to get the sword. It has now turned into a deadly game of keep away as they desperately try to get it to Adam. Teela wishes to assist but has taken everything she's got to keep Lin at bay. The game has come to an end as Orko and Cringer both fall to Skeletor's attack, but he too is reaching his limit. Forced to catch his breath, he searches for the sword only to find it in the hands of the true champion.
By the power of Grayskull, I have the power!
The poison injury is healed, but same goes for Skeletor. However, he is struggling to maintain his champion form as the power beckons to leave him. By holding onto it against the power's own will, it distorts Skeletor's form and mind. The fight between He-Man and Skeletor ensues. Seeing what Skeletor has become, Lin doesn't feel that the fight is worth it and tries to flee, but Teela is right on her heels. She's shocked that Teela can leave, but then notices that she's constantly pushing her back in the direction of the castle. The longer they go back and forth, the more Teela becomes visually distressed. That confirms for Lin. This is nothing but a small window of opportunity that is quickly closing for her. Feeling her time coming to an end, Teela grabs hold of Lin and flies them back into the castle. The impact knocks Lin unconscious. With not much time left, she sets out to assist He-Man. Doing his best to fend off Skeletor, He-Man notices that Skeletor's body is deteriorating. He yells at him to end the madness before it destroys him completely, but Skeletor only sees red at this point. Feeling that there's no other choice, He-Man prepares to make the final blow, but Teela stops him. She reaches her limit and tells him to call back the power. He does so and Skeletor's body deteriorates before their eyes, with only his staff as the last remnants of him. The battle has been won and now it's time to end the war. Teela steps into the center just like her mother did and ends the nightmare, allowing peace to fall onto Eternia once more. With everyone distracted, Lin teleports herself away with only Orko seeing. Adam is beside himself for Teela's outcome, but she assures him that she has no regrets. I want to take a moment and talk about some issues with this reboot. We eat with our eyes first, so let's just talk about the character designs first. What's with all the muscles? Yes, people who have physically demanding jobs will develop muscles, but you don't get these kind of muscles unless you work for it. And why does Evil Lyn have them? She's a sorceress of sorts. Andra and Teela I can kinda understand, but the design. I binge-watched the whole show after the second part came out, and Teela's character design never grew on me, mainly because it didn't fit her character, and that's saying a lot from someone who didn't watch any of the previous He-Man series. Honestly, it was her hairstyle. It didn't fit within the world she was in, and just stood out like a sore thumb. Which leads me to Evil Lyn. She was my favorite character, but again, with the designs. She didn't need the muscles, and she sure as hell didn't need more when she transformed. Look at Casca from Berserk. This is a woman that has faced men head-to-head in battle since she was young, but is she bulging with muscles? No, she's toned, but she still has her curves. What shot the designers in the foot was showing a previous female champion that wasn't bulked up like this. It makes no sense. And why did they get rid of Evil Lyn's hair? It didn't look good on her, but I figured that long hair is a pain in the ass to animate, and that's why they got rid of it. Whether my version is better, worse, or just as equally questionable as the reboot, one thing can be said with confidence. Mistakes were made. Normally I try to avoid heavy topics just because I don't want that to be the focus of these videos, but this needs to be said. This has been a growing issue that this show kind of broke the dam to. It's a never-ending occurrence that one narrative is pushed aside to make room for another. I'm all for equality and diversity, but why does it have to be one or the other? Why did He-Man have to step aside just because Teela was a strong female character? Why can't they stand side by side together to protect their home? I really don't know how much control Kevin Smith had in the reboot, but whatever his involvement was, he made mistakes. After the first half was released and the pile of negative reviews started pouring in, Kevin Smith did a live stream with Griffin Newman about the criticisms, and instead of trying to meet the audience halfway and admitting that yes, it wasn't what they were expecting, and just urging them to give the second half a try, he just made fun of the situation and doesn't really take the subject seriously. This baffles me because he still had a second half to promote. How does it make sense to make fun of the audience that is taking time out of their schedule to watch the show? All this will do is deter them from watching anymore, and that's exactly what happened. By doing this, it showed that he didn't care, which is a slap in the face to the original creators of the show, and it's disrespectful to all the individuals who worked on this project. Being the face of a show or project puts a responsibility on that person to be professional. I'm just gonna wrap it up here. Final thoughts: the character design needed some work, the story had issues, but the animation was really nice, and it is a shame that it didn't work for fans of the show and fans of animation in general. What's really disappointing is that people really didn't mind the direction the show went in. It was the deception and the blatant lies that they were told that really pissed them off. Every time I think that we might be making progress with Western animation, shit like this happens. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and like and subscribe.